here we go again, another sequel, 35 years after the first film, and Tim Burton has been kind of going through some rough times, maybe some tiny successes, but not as monumental as he used to be back in the day. So can he hit twice? Can he actually hit for a second time? Can he actually strike gold? I mean, why else would he be going back if for not to do something that he could add to this world, that he helped direct? Because if you don't have anything to say, man, then there's no reason to touch this. So you better bring something to it.
Really? Is this a figment of your imagination?
Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is once again directed by Tim Burton with a screenplay by Alfred Gough and Miles Millar, and a story by Alfred Gough, Miles Millar, and Seth Grahame-Smith. The film stars Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, Justin Theroux, Arthur Conti, Monica Bellucci, Jenna Ortega, and Willem Dafoe. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, after a family tragedy, 3 generations of Deet's family returns home to Winter River. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter Astrid accidentally opens the portal to the afterlife. There has been a sequel to Beetlejuice in the works since the 90s. There has been talks about it, and there has been discussions about potentially making a sequel to the first film with some of the original writers, but of course one of them had unfortunately passed away, who wrote the screenplay for it, and it just kind of all fell through. Tim Burton went on to do his own thing for the next 35 years or so. As of recently, Tim Burton, like I said, has just been kind of a bit of a slump. Most of his films just haven't been hitting the same way as he used to have them hit back in the day. For every Batman, and even Batman Returns, we can throw that in there too, Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, Mars Attacks, and maybe even produce something like A Nightmare Before Christmas. There's a Planet of the Apes remake, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Dark Shadows, and both Alice in Wonderland and Dumbo live action have kind of shown that Tim Burton has kind of fallen off the wayside when it comes to the projects he has done, and kind of shown that he's just kind of used to the formula shtick that he's used to ever since Beetlejuice, which is to just make everything weird. There's no sense of feeling like there's a reason why it's weird. It's just weird because Tim Burton wants to make it weird. And I'm telling you that I respect Tim Burton. I really do. But when you just keep on doing just weird things in films without a reason, then it's kind of just showing that you're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again because you just don't have anything else to do with regards to other different types of styling. After 35 years, he is going back to where the weirdness all began with the original Beetlejuice. After seeing this sequel, I am more disappointed than I am mad. Because I don't think this is a terrible movie. Alright, far from it, it's not bad. It's not like it's unwatchable. You can watch it and you can still have a good time. But I cannot deny there are some things that trip this movie up that does hurt it from actually being a good follow-up to the first film. Let's be honest, nothing's ever going to beat the first movie, alright? Nothing will. But at the very least, can you at least be close to or at par with the original? And for this, it kind of falls short in many areas. But before giving my issues, here are some of the positives that I saw. The performances are enjoyable. Just like with the first movie, Michael Keaton hasn't lost his touch as the titular character Beetlejuice. If for nothing else, Keaton continues to steal every scene that he is in throughout this entire movie. He is the reason why to watch this. It is almost like Keaton hasn't lost what makes Beetlejuice funny. He hasn't lost the edge. He still feels like how he was 35 years ago. And all the more reason why I actually do think that this movie can be enjoyable is because of him. Because of his energy, because of his presence, because of his commitment. He has shown how much he does love this character, how much he respects the world of what Beetlejuice is supposed to be. So, if for nothing else, Michael Keaton always will shine, not in just any movie, but for him to return to a role 35 years after, he still has it. Winona Ryder is still strange and bizarre as Lydia Deetz. Ryder plays a woman who has regrets and struggles with her gift of talking to the dead, making her feel how she was all those years ago. But now, of course, much older, has a daughter. But the thing I do like about Winona Ryder in this movie is how much she is struggling to deal with coming to terms with her gift instead of kind of seeing it as like a curse or like something to be shy or to run away from. And it's really great to see Winona Ryder still kind of portray how she was many years ago for her first film, and to see her now all grown up and actually playing her debut role again is just fun to see how much that she does like this character. She likes how this character represents a connection between the living and the dead, and for that reason I think Winona Ryder does a good job of really capturing what it means to have not just regrets but also to struggle with problems with families. Both Keaton and Ryder work well in the film. Their duo feels like a companionship and a team. Throughout this movie, they are trying to find Astrid. That is, one negative with this movie. But to see both Keaton and Ryder come together again after 35 years, as much as they didn't have a lot of screen time in the original, in here they have much more screen time, and they work very well together and actually have a good back and forth banter with one another. Catherine O'Hara hasn't lost her touch as Delia Dietz. O'Hara still feels like a prima donna, but now at least has a softer side to her compared to how she was a little bit in the original. She kinda was fine with Lydia, but not really. She was never really fond of her. Here, she's actually a little bit more caring in a way, but still has that selfishness to her. But it was great to also see her relationship with another castmate that I will talk about in a minute. But it's great to know that Catherine O'Hara is still delivering a very funny and wacky type of performance that you kind of would expect for a character like this to be after many years, and to see her kind of add a little bit something to it with the softness of the character after that long of a time. It's great to see her. New to the cast, Justin Theroux is sleazy as Roy, Lydia's current boyfriend and TV producer. Theroux brings the selfishness and cowardliness of what a Hollywood producer that we kind of know to see in Hollywood. A lot of times, see a lot of those types of people in there where they are just selfish. They don't care about anybody else. They only care about ratings. They only care about the money and power. And it's very clearly on full display with Justin Theroux. It's very much self-aware of who Rory is, but at the very least, Justin Theroux is playing it with such, in a way, gravitas, but also just a lot of fun to it that makes him at least enjoyable and fun to watch in the film. Both Ryder and Theroux work great together. Ryder is vulnerable and finds comfort with Theroux, who tries to take advantage of her throughout the movie. You can tell that she's just enamored with him in a way, but also for the audience and for everyone else who isn't oblivious to it, he is trying to take advantage of her, trying to use whatever sort of power she has as a TV host for a ghost show. And so he is trying to take advantage of a woman who has gone through so much trauma and so much pain that he is willing to do whatever it takes to just weasel his way to get whatever he wants out of it. Jenna Ortega is fun as Astrid, Lydia's daughter. Ortega brings the same energy as Ryder, how she was many years ago, but makes it her own, making her truly a Dietz all around. Jenna Ortega, of course, is now the new Scream Queen. She is, at least for my age. And to see Ortega still have that same type of energy that Ryder brought to Lydia all those years ago, I think is great. It kind of shows passing of a torch, that legacy, as you will, of Dietz women still continuing on. Both Ryder, O'Hara, and Ortega are excellent together. Seeing 3 generations of Dietz women play off each other made the experience fun. Seeing how Ryder, O'Hara, and Ortega banter one another, have conversations between 3 generations, grandmother, mother, and daughter, and seeing how the relationship develops, I think works well into the movie at the very least, with this message of conquering fear, in a way, as Lydia would say in the trailer, and accepting who your family is. Willem Dafoe is funny and a joy as Wolf Jackson. Dafoe is campy and wacky as a afterlife cop who was a B-movie actor. As always, Dafoe is just a treat in everything that he is in. There's never a time that I don't think that Willem Dafoe is never a treat. If anybody thinks that this man is a problem, I would look at them and say that they're crazy, because Dafoe just throws himself into any situation that he is in a movie, and he just goes insane, and he just goes crazy, and he just looks so weird. I can't get enough of Dafoe, and as much as I have a problem with his story, can I say I actually hated him for it? No. I think he's just funny in the film. The direction is solid. Of course, director Tim Burton brings his usual style, but feels genuine this time around instead of shtick. and it feels like his heart is in it for once, because I just feel like for the past couple of years, Tim Burton just kind of was going on autopilot, and this time around, I do think that he does try to, at the very least, be a little bit more genuine with the weirdness of it all, because this could have easily been shtick, and you can maybe see that, but really, I do believe that in his direction, that he does really truly have passion in this project because of how much he enjoys this world and how much experience that he has had with the weirdness of it all. Music is stellar. Again, composer Danny Elfman continues to understand Burton's style very well by making a score that feels like a continuation of the originals. This man never misses a beat. I'd be hard-pressed if I could find a score from Danny Elfman that doesn't complement what the movie is. And as much as I have problems with this movie, that music, it still hits. It's still a great score. I think Danny Elfman is a true genius when it comes to the bizarreness of it all and the horror aspect of it. And I think it works well, and that's what makes him such a successful composer on a lot of different movies, is because of his embracing of weirdness, but also kind of bit of horror element to it. The production is amazing. From the sets, costumes, and props, it all feels like how the original movie was all those years ago. Production team did a good job of making sure that it does feel like nothing has changed. It all kind of looks and feels the same with regards to how this movie looks and feels. There's never a moment that I don't think that this movie super duper clean. I do feel like this movie does its best with trying to capture the feeling of what the original movie was like 35 years ago. Cinematography is terrific. Cinematographer Harris Zimberlucas manages to capture the world of the dead, truly continuing Burton's vision on full. I'd be hard-pressed if this movie does not truly embrace the dead. If you are going into the afterlife, embrace the dead nature and the feeling, the look of it all, and that is what the cinematography is. The cinematography complements what the dead is. It feels very much lived in, it feels decayed, and it's because of the camera work and the shots that are used throughout this movie that makes the world of the dead feel alive. Effects are great. Staying true to the original, the film follows in having the practical effects still be front and center. It all looks amazing. The amount of practical effects used throughout this movie is incredible. I'm glad at the very least Tim Burton realized we are not going to use visual effects, and if we are, we'll use minor, but for the most part, we are going to stick to traditional practical usage for this movie, and he does that, and I am very impressed with how much practicality is in it, whether it be Wolf Jackson's side where he was killed, or sometimes the expression that Beetlejuice makes, or even some of the stop motion animation with the sandworms. That's what I like about sequels that want to stay at least a little bit true to the original by having the practicality still be at the forefront. Aside from that, I found this movie to be overcrowded and disappointing, and that is very hard for me to say, because as much as I know that I should like this because of how much effort was put into it, at the same time there is some things in this movie that just holds it back. So here are now the negatives. The story is lackluster. It lacks depth, and it feels bare bones with not much to it. It truly feels unfocused. It's kind of hard for me to say this because, in a way, really the story of this movie is kind of hard to explain, because the overarching story, I think, can be good, but there's not a lot to that overarching story other than just that the Dietz going back to Wind River after a tragedy, who we now know as Charles Dietz, the father, and Beetlejuice is involved. Comes back, tries to haunt them. That's it. And there's just not much to it. There's not a lot of comedy and darkness to that story. It just kind of feels like it's trying so hard to have something with the subplots, which we'll get to, but the story itself, if you take away those subplots, I just kind of feel like it's left very hollow. The subplots, they are everywhere. The film feels overstuffed with too many side stories going on. It makes it harder for the plot as a whole because of how much this movie is packed with subplots. And I feel like if you remove most of the subplots, except for maybe one, most of this movie falls apart. And that is the problem. They cannot stick to one idea. It just kind of feels like the overarching plot is the whole them going back to Wind River after Charles Deed's death. The middle of it, the actual story, is just made up of a bunch of subplots, with one actually trying to be part of the plot, but then that kind of ends really abruptly. And so what you have is just a bunch of loose threads that you're just trying to go through the motion. And for that, this movie suffers because it has way too much going on. The images of Jeffrey Jones is just too much in this movie, and I will talk about that in a minute. Once, maybe twice is fine, but they show him about 4 to 5 times with having his face. He's not in the movie, but his face or his likeness is just too much. With his background now publicized, it kind of feels disgusting. And for those who don't know, of course, Jeffrey Jones used to be big in the 80s and 90s, and of course played Charles Dietz in the original. But the thing that, if some don't know, unless YouTube has a problem with it, is that he's a pedophile. He is a registered sex offender. And that is the disgusting part, is that this man is a discredited actor because of who he is in public, and the fact that Burton just kept on throwing his imagery throughout this movie, it just was too much, and I'm just left surprised that Burton would use him quite often with pictures and even a stop motion animation. It got to a point where I kind of was felt a little bit disgusted, because you know who this man is, you know who he is in real life. I understand it's a character, but the likeness of using Jeffrey Jones, whether it be old pictures or a stop motion, that's a little bit disgusting, man. That's a little bit very cynical to just throw this man's imagery in it when you know very well who this man is. The movie isn't anything new. There's nothing new that this film doesn't try to even attempt to do to shake things up, which is a very huge disappointment. I thought that they would try something a little bit different, but in the end, it just kind of ends up being a little bit like the original. There's nothing too different from the first movie that you see in this movie. It all kind of feels the same thing, except maybe some added elements and maybe a little lore, but for the most part, there's nothing really different that goes on in this movie that makes it stand out from the first movie. At that point, you might as well just go watch the first movie, because in the end, this just kind of feels like just the same thing all over again. In the end, it doesn't come close to that first movie. It had the potential to be good or even great, but it's just a letdown. Overall, I think this is a huge letdown. Though there's enjoyment, I walked away just kind of frustrated. For the most part, I found myself really conflicted and really feeling like, man, I feel like Burton kind of missed the mark, even with what his own property is, or at the very least what he directed and what he knows about this world, or at least had some involvement. Because in the end, I just kind of walked away feeling like, man, he just kind of threw a lot of things together just to make another Beetlejuice movie. As much as the direction and weirdness was much better this time around, I just feel like he just couldn't put it all together to make it feel hugely genuine. I'm gonna give Beetlejuice a 6 out of 10. It's alright, it's okay. I think that if you just want at least something to watch with regards to another Beetlejuice movie, I think you'll find some enjoyment. But for me, I just found it frustrating and just downright disappointing, because I think there was potential for this to be good, but in the end, I just kind of walked away feeling like, man, I really don't think this was necessary, but alright, whatever. That's just me. Now I will do my review for Transformers 1 and then the rest of the September movies. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.